obvious. Instead, I'd like to take a closer look at how both Trump and Manson answer questions in formal settings and explore the crossover between their unique speaking habits. First and foremost, both have an extreme, almost cartoonish confidence about them, which can manifest itself in very similar or very different ways. For example, neither seems able to admit fault in any situation, no matter how much evidence is stacked up against them.
Yeah, but in the world that I live in, I've never made a bad move in my whole life.
You said before, I can take hits when it's justified.
Correct.
Right? 100%. Can you give me an example of a time when someone was critical of you and you thought to yourself, I deserve that hit, I deserve that column, I deserve
Probably
that.
I could never do that.
And each will openly brag and self-promote, whether about their own successes or intelligence or something deeper, like their moral compass.
And I made a lot of money in Atlantic City, and I'm very proud of it.
But I've seen it falling. I'm very aware when it comes to seeing things.
He was given a very high award by the Marines at the Waldorf Astoria a couple of months ago.
I'm brand new. Everything I do is always brand new. I'm on the premise of reality.
But though the content is different, both are just shamelessly praising themselves in an attempt at some sort of superiority. And that's just where the crossover begins. More and more common today in politics and media is the phrase, whataboutism, which is essentially just when someone is asked about their own personal wrongdoing and says, but what about, and then goes on to name someone else's wrongdoing. Instead of directly refuting or disproving the interviewer, they try to flip the conversation onto an opponent and claim some sort of hypocrisy latent in the question. Trump and his friends at Fox News are quickly becoming the new ambassadors of whataboutism, as John Oliver pointed out on his latest episode.
Now, Trump does this all the time, most famously when he was asked why he hadn't forcibly condemned the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, and this was his response.
What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs?
And Manson wasn't afraid to use the exact same technique in response to a question about the Sharon Tate murder.
Feel bad? What about them other people? What about them poor people starving to death over in the Appalachians? Do you think about that? What about the boat people that and all the other people that died over there? What about that little girl?
But for me, whataboutism gets at something deeper in both the Trump and Manson playbooks, which comes up in nearly every answer they give. And this is the broader concept of diverting attention, which I basically define as switching the subject in order to avoid the initial question. Now, I think this is an important moment to mention that I'm not claiming either of these men consciously employ these techniques. In fact, I think that'd be pretty hard to argue. But that doesn't mean these similarities aren't potentially important to define and recognize in order to better understand them. Like any cheap sleight-of-hand magician, Trump and Manson, consciously or not, constantly shift from one topic to the next to create these little distractions. To better understand this, I have to take a look at another characteristic we often find in Manson. This, in a sense, is really just the classic old man telling a boring story to see if they like the grandpa says.
So, I decided to go to Morganville, which is what they call Shelbyville in those days. So I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time. Now, change the bearing was kitchen, and those days, Nichols had pictures of Bumblebee China.
Watch here as Manson gets similarly distracted trying to respond to a very straightforward question.
Do you believe the Tate LaBianca murders had anything to do with sort of ending the period of the 60s, creating a...
Yeah, it was the peak of the love that was running. Why don't we do it? No one will be watching us. And it's banging 24 hours a day. I didn't write that music.
Okay.
Take it to the Queen of England. Ask her why she's sending her kids over here ducking from that Hindu pimp that's coming out of that New Delhi penitentiary.
And of course Manson is a little less tethered to reality, but the distracted branching structure of their monologues are actually very similar. So yes, Trump will never sound quite as unhinged as Manson, but the aimlessness and self-distraction at the core of their speaking habits are surprisingly similar. Watch here as John Oliver uses a voice actor to strip one of Trump's speeches down to the actual text itself.
You look at the nuclear deal, the thing that really bothers me. It would have been so easy, and it's not as important as these lives are. Nuclear is so powerful. My uncle explained that to me many, many years ago, the power, and that was 35 years ago. He would explain the power of what's going to happen, and he was right. Who would have thought? But when you look at what's going on with the 4 prisoners, now it used to be 3, now it's 4, but when it was 3, and even now, I would have said, it's all in the messenger. Fellas, and it is fellas, because, you know, they haven't figured that the women are smarter right now than the men, so you know.
Just like Manson and Grandpa Simpson, he keeps getting caught up in these tangents of free association, vocalizing every thought that comes to mind, constantly distracted by his own answer. Now, these 3 elements, while each fascinating on their own, are not particularly revolutionary. But what makes Manson and Trump such unique interviewees is how frequently these 3 elements come together, effectively distracting the listener from their misdeeds and bringing the attention onto their supposed best qualities.
Criminal will always go to a familiar place. Tex had been to that house. Tex went back to that house. Here's the conversation. Indian Mesa. We got 4 campfires. We got 4 queens on a motorcycle gang, a motorcycle group that rides SS motorcycles out of Venice, Santa Monica. So we're riding motorcycles and we're all up there and we got these fires going and we got this big problem that came up. I had to go shoot somebody for Tex. Bobby's in the prison. My brother's in jail. Now, understand my mind, all my life I've been in jail because I didn't have no one to get me out of jail. I didn't have no brother outside. So I spent years and years and years and years just because nobody would come and sign their name and get me out of jail. And the jail couldn't let me out because I didn't have no place to go. So I spent 22 years in prison because I didn't have nobody outside. I can't let somebody that's with me stay in jail. It just ain't, it's not in my makeup, man.
And I want clean air. And we can do that. But we don't have to destroy our businesses. We don't have to destroy our country. And by the way, China isn't abiding by anything. They're buying all of our coal. We can't use coal anymore, essentially. They're buying our coal and they're using it. Now, when you talk about the planet, it's so big out there. We're here, they're there. It's like they're our next door neighbor, right? In terms of the universe. Miss Universe, by the way, made a great deal when I sold it. Oh, did I get rich? That was a great deal. Oh.
Now, of course, in content and lucidity, there are vast differences between these two. But in terms of speaking habits and underlying strategies of manipulation, the parallels can really be uncanny. Now, the obvious next question is, how do these particular tactics manage to make these men so attractive to listeners? Manson managed to gather a family of willing followers around him, and Trump gathered a little less than half a nation. So why does aimlessness, distraction, and blatant bragging work to win someone over? What psychological nerves do these rhetorical strategies hit? Would someone literally kill for Trump in the same way they did for Manson? Because the more I listen to these two, honestly, the only difference I can hear between them is that one will always just be this violent cult leader primarily focused on creating insular groups and mass paranoia. And the other... oh, shit.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming?
No sidetracks, Donald.
Piece of cake.